Hello, children. Happy Thursday. Okay, so I'm gonna do the on this day, and then after the on this day, we'll do some lecture notes. But I need to make sure, either, so just maybe let's pause me in between the on this day and the lecture notes so that you can get those handed out. It's a green sheet of paper. It's the same as what we've done in the past, so just be ready for that. And then you'll have the rest of the class period to work on, 28.2 to 28.4. And then I believe, I want to say on Monday we'll do an activity in class, but I'm playing with the idea of not letting you do the activity unless you're caught up in your ISN. So I'll keep you posted on that. On this day in history, Jamestown settlers arrive in 1607. So 100 colonists arrive along the western bank of the James River in Virginia to found Jamestown. It was the first permanent English settlement in North America. They dispatched from England by the London Company, and they sailed across the Atlantic aboard 3 different ships. If you've seen the movie Pocahontas, it is loosely based on Jamestown. As you will see, my next point, Captain John Smith, who's the main character, one of the main characters, was one of the colonists sent by King James I. And after 2 weeks of settling, they were attacked by warriors of the local Algonquin, Native Americans. In December, John Smith and 2 others were captured. 2 other colonists were killed, but John Smith was saved by Pocahontas. You guys, it's so romantic. The next 2 years, disease, starvation, and Native American attacks wiped out most of the colony. So it's really not the Disney story that's portrayed, but they did have Pocahontas and John Smith are actually real people. So there you go. The Jamestown settlement, what it looks like is in this top picture. And then, John Smith is down here. He looks a little bit different than he did in the movie. So there's the on this day. So if you need to pause to hand out lecture notes, go ahead and do that. Ooh, hold on, I gotta get it to where, there we go. Okay, so chapter 28, we're looking at Florence, the cradle of the Renaissance. So this is a picture of modern day Florence, but this building here, that was built during the Renaissance. So if you remember, do you guys remember the picture that I showed you of, and it said Florencia on the top, and it was in your textbook when we were talking about chapter 27 the other day, and it was a map of Florence but painted. Honestly, I feel like it looks relatively similar to what you see on that map. So we're looking at Florence, the cradle of the Renaissance. I think you only have a couple key terms for this one. I think there's only 3. So just be ready for that. So let's get going here. So your key question is, what advances were made during the Renaissance? So that's what you're looking at right now. What advances were made during the Renaissance? So make sure you get that written in, please. Also, as a friendly reminder, let's make sure your name is on the paper. What advances were made during the Renaissance? So looking at Florence, this is it's a different picture of Florencia from the one I was talking about. But as you can see, they did a pretty good job of depicting their little buildings and painting. So Florence is an Italian city-state and leading cultural center during the Renaissance. That is one of your key terms, so make sure you get that written down. And it's the birthplace to many famous people. A lot of these famous artists or Renaissance figures that we talk about were from Italy. Maybe not necessarily from Florence, but they were from a different city-state. The location, it's located on the Arno River. In Florence, they were a hub for woolen cloth, and they were the home of the 14th century Europe's banking center. and this helped increase their trade and commerce during that time. And you know that the increase of trade and commerce is the reason that the Renaissance can happen. Remember, we talked about rich patrons like the Medici's being able to spend money to have people make works of art for them. So wealth in bank and wool and cloth supported intense cultural activity. Rich residents became patrons. And then the Medici spent lavish sums on art, and it was also a center for learning. So a lot of things happening in Florence during this time. On your paper, you have an empty map of the Italian city-states. I want you to shade where Florence is. None of them are written in, so you have to figure out where is Florence on your map. So Florence is pretty centrally located in the Italian city-states. Remember, we talked about Venice being one of the most if not the most influential city-state because of its access to the Adriatic Sea and then further into the Mediterranean Sea. So there you go. Here we go. So merchants and the oh, sorry. Did you need more time here? Sorry. Okay. Good. I'm going to the next one. So merchants and the Medici. So merchants, when we read about this a little bit the other day, that merchants and guilds and boards started to rule the Italian city-states, especially places like Florence. They dominated politics. They did not inherit their social rank, so they used their wits to survive, which is pretty important, right? They weren't like the monarchs who just retained or nobles who retained their position because their dad had that position. And this led to the rise in the importance of individual merit. So if you remember back to chapter 27, we talked about this idea called humanism and the emphasis on the individual, and that is what Florence has going for them. The Medici banking family came to dominate Florence. They had branch offices all throughout Italy and Europe. Isn't this interesting? I don't know. I just hadn't thought about the Renaissance world being a place where banking was something that happened all the time. Cosimo de' Medici was the wealthiest European of his time. Cosimo, I think it is this one. I have a picture of both of them on the other side. His grandson, Lorenzo de' Medici, became a great patron of the arts. A patron, I don't have patron on your, I don't think I have patron on your key terms list. But he is someone who financially supports an artist or the art. Oh, never mind. It's there. Okay. So, the Medici, you're going to hear that name kind of come up throughout this lesson and a couple other lessons. So here is Cosimo de' Medici and Lorenzo de' Medici. Brain break. These are these little 6-seater planes that we ride on this trip. We raft down the Colorado River, and then where we end up, we're like a couple hours from Moab, Utah, and so then we fly back to Moab in these little 6-seater planes. I get terribly motion sick every time I've done this, but they're super fun and just a weird experience. Bush planes, that's what they're called. I couldn't remember what they were called. Okay, so building Florence's dome, right? This is that domed building that you see in every picture of Florence because it's their pride and joy. It's called the Santa Maria del Fiore, okay? It's the greatest cathedral in Florence, and they began building the cathedral in 1296. Now, what's so special about this is it was built differently than domes before its time. They had to leave an opening in the dome. You see that at the top on this top picture up here, right? And they began, it's also known as El Duomo, and it still stands today in Florence. My goodness, guys, sorry. So the dome was built by Filippo Brunelleschi. Okay, Brunelleschi. Okay, and And you're supposed to, on your notes, you're sketching what the dome looks like. But Brunelleschi studied ancient ruins and learned math and constructing the building. So what's he doing? Well, he's applying engineering skills to this. Maybe it wasn't called engineering at the time, but that's exactly what he's doing. And I'm sure there are some of you in here who want to be an engineer. Well, this is part of what your job might look like. It rose 300 feet above the city. So there isn't any arch support like we would see in other arches of its time. Here's the dome. Now, when you see this picture, because you're close up, you can definitely has the feel of it being older, right? But when in the pictures that are a little farther back of the city, it doesn't look as old. Let's compare some domes, okay? So remember, this one is 300 feet. So St. Peter's Basilica in Rome is the tallest dome, okay? St. Paul's Cathedral in London is also fairly tall. Then you have, the yellow one is the Superdome in New Orleans, okay? Then you have Hagia Sophia and the Pantheon. Interesting, right? Compare them domes. So the dome, El Duomo is about 300 feet. Other famous domes. We have Il Duomo in Florence. This is St. Peter's. This is St. Paul's. And this is the U.S. Capitol building. So can you tell that they're kind of modeled after the same thing? Okay, advances in Florence. Like, we have to learn about what was so different about this time. So wealthy art patrons made Florence a thriving center for art. We know this. The Medici spent a lot. They had all the monies, okay? But them spending this much money created a lot of opportunities for talented painters. Pictured here is the Adoration of the Magi. I think it's Botticelli. So there are clearly some advances in painting, and we kind of looked at that the other day. But the Renaissance painters were influenced by classical culture and humanism, and you know this, right? They wanted to depict real people who posed in lifelike ways. So in this Adoration of the Magi, you can see nobody's just like looking like it's a picture, like they're looking at the painter or whatever, right? They're all engaged in some sort of natural movement. The faces expressed emotion. It's a realistic setting. You can see the natural background and landscape. Their paints. They had oil-based paints. They mixed powders and pigments with linseed oil in order to achieve these oil-based paints. It was thicker and it dried slower. So that is a big change in painting. Oh, more pics on the planes. You got to wear the headphones to hear each other talk because it's really loud. This is his name is Mr. Kelderman, Greg. I call him Greg, and he is the leader of the trip. And then I don't even know what kid this is, and this is Alex, and Alex is a fun kid. So this is the big one: the use of perspective. Okay, so they used to create the appearance of depth on a flat surface. It's used to create the appearance of depth on a flat surface. A few ways to do this are the size of different objects. The smaller the object, the further away it appears. And then careful shading could give depth in a 3D appearance. So you can see that. These are Leonardo da Vinci's drawings, but you can see the shading, right? Also, like, dang, this guy was yoked. Those are some good muscles. Math and science will also influence the use of perspective. Masaccio used geometry to figure out how to divide spaces in a painting. So if you've ever seen, I don't know if Mr. Morton has had you do this in art yet, but you kind of like grid your paper to help you create a more full picture of what you're trying to give. It helps scenes becomes more lifelike. And then some artists studied anatomy and observed how bodies moved, and then were able to convey that in their artwork. So, if you're looking at this progression, let's move my face. Okay, linear perspective added depth to an image. And foreshortening is the shortening of lines to create depth. So look at this progression, 1280s. There doesn't look like there's a whole lot of depth. Look at how big this person looks compared to everybody else, right? And then this picture we've seen this one, 1380s, but we've seen this one. And they're trying to use a little bit more perspective, right? But this still looks pretty big, even though it's farther away. But this one is really great. Look at how these people are far away and they look smaller. That's perspective. That's using good perspective, right? And then the people who are closer to you or closer to your eye in the artwork are bigger, right? It makes sense. And here it's the opposite. Look, these ones are the smallest ones. I don't know. It's really cool, this stuff. Okay, so this is Leonardo da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper. It's a religious work showing Jesus' last meal before his crucifixion. This is Jesus sitting in the middle, and he has his 12 disciples around him. Guys, use of geometry. There are shapes within this bad boy. Look, triangle. What's this called? A rhombus? Is that right? I don't know. Trapezoid? Okay? There are clear lines in this, and it keeps, I don't know, it makes it more pleasing to the eye, I feel. Also, you can, if you drew a line horizontally and a line vertically, all of your focus is on Jesus in the middle. Look at this picture again, right? That Jesus is the center of this, and that is who you're looking at, okay? All right, so we're gonna briefly talk about, I'm gonna stop at Michelangelo because I wanna talk about his works when I'm in class, but we'll start with Donatello. So there were lots of advances in sculpture work as well. They carved statues that looked like real humans. Look at these. This is the statue of David by Michelangelo. This is the statue of David by Donatello. This is La Pieta, which is also Michelangelo. But freestanding statues that could be viewed on all sides, okay? Which these pictures don't all give you that 3D or that full view, but you can tell that it's moving in that, like you can tell you could walk on the other side of this and see the backside, right? And this was very different from medieval times. So let's talk about Donatello, okay? Donatello. Apparently, I'm going to be just down here in the corner, okay? So Donatello lived from 1386 to 1466, and he was an Italian sculptor. He was a master of granite and bronze, okay? He made sculptures more realistic by carving natural postures and expressions that revealed personality, right? We like personality in our artwork. His best-known work is equestrian statue of Gaudamaleda. He also sculpted a David statue, which was a favorite subject of Renaissance sculptors. They loved sculpting David. Everyone's was a little bit different, though. This is his equestrian of the Gaudamaleda. So equestrian deals with horses, so obviously there's a horse there. And that's where we'll stop today. So you'll be working on your ISN the rest of the class time. If you have any questions, you can shoot me an email. I don't know if I'll see it or not, but I will try to get back to you as quickly as possible. And then I will post the slides. If you missed anything, the slides should be posted to your Google Classroom now. So have a great rest of your Thursday, and I will see you guys on Monday.